Excellent, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for those of you who are joining us for this final work session for the evaluation of the Resident Curator Program application for the Ash Grove property in the Hunter Mill District. This meeting is being hosted by the Fairfax County Park Authority, who administrates the Resident Curator Program. My name is Ben Boxer, and I am the Public Information Officer for the Park Authority. I'm joined this morning by members of the Park Authority's Resident Curator Program evaluation team. And I'll make a few brief introductions. We have first the chair of our panel, Stephanie Langton. She is the Resident Curator Program Manager. We also have Dave Bukta, the Heritage Conservation Branch Manager of the Park Authority, Elizabeth Crowell, Archaeology and Collections Branch Manager, and Michelle Meadows, a Senior Right-of-Way Agent with the Land Acquisition and Leasing Branch. We're also pleased to have with us Debbie Robison, Schaefer, from Schaefer, Wilson, Sarver, and Gray. And we also have Claudia Diamond on the panel, who is the president of the Westwood Village HOA. We'd also like to thank and acknowledge members of our Park Authority team who are working behind the scenes to help facilitate our virtual meeting this morning. During this meeting, the evaluation team and staff will be providing a summary of the October 28th public meeting, which we had at the Patrick Henry Library, an overview of the virtual evaluation team packet that all of our panelists have, including the public comments that have been received, and a review of the scoring process. There will be some discussions of the proposal under consideration, and the panel will make a determination on the recommendation of the application. Following this meeting, staff will follow up with the Park Authority leadership on the outcome of the meeting. At this time, there will not be opportunity for public comment or questions in this forum, but we are pleased to have those of you who may be watching or who will watch the recording of this meeting as well to be here. With that introduction, and I should also introduce Sheila Consol. She is with us. She is the applicant for this property. Happy to have you with us. With all those introductions, I'm pleased now to turn the meeting over to our Resident Curator Program Manager, Stephanie Langton.
Thank you, Ben. First, I want to thank everyone in the Public Information Office who brought everything together to give us the opportunity to not only hold this discussion today, but also to carry out our whole public process for the Resident Curator Program. Hi, everyone, to the team. I would like to thank you all as well for your time and commitment to this critical in the Resident Curator Program process. I know several of you have been involved on the RCP evaluation team in the past, and so you all know how many moving parts there are, different county departments and Park Authority branches and divisions coming together to the table to make it happen. So we really appreciate it. It's been a busy month with our meetings and our public comment period, and today we meet to evaluate and score the application for Ash Grove and ultimately make a determination. So in the interest of time, I'll dive right into the agenda. I'll start with an overview of our public meeting on the 28th. We heard a very engaging applicant presentation, and there was some great discussion that followed. Some of the comments raised during that time had to do with parking concerns and increased traffic concerns to the house. Now it is a residential use proposal, but the applicant did propose, in addition to a required annual open house, other kind of private tour opportunities. So we'll have a good opportunity during our scoring to discuss that. Another document I've shared with the evaluation team as kind of part of our virtual meeting packets for today is the compiled public comments that were submitted through the online public input platform. Well, we received one comment, very favorable, and we'll have a good opportunity to kind of discuss that during our scoring. So a little review on the scoring process. As you know, we make use of the program's established evaluation criteria, kind of as outlined in our program manual and on our scorecards. There isn't a threshold, a certain kind of minimum score that an application needs to meet in order to be selected. It certainly means more when there are more than one application. The scores can kind of be weighed against each other. But even with one application to consider, the score is a good indicator of whether the evaluation team thinks it's a strong application, and it's an important record for our evaluation team that we have considered each component of the application. So we will have the opportunity for a discussion on each of the criteria on the scorecard. We value what you each have to say, and we value going through each criteria, each of the categories, to see how they kind of weigh against each other for the proposed curatorship. So we'll go criteria by criteria, and if there is discussion and we want to take the whole meeting to finalize scores for each section, we can do that, and then return to it at the end of the meeting. Or alternatively, if they're satisfied with their score as we go through each section, I can take the scores right then and there, and I'll put them into a matrix I made so that at the end of the meeting, we'll have the final scores from everyone for each category, and I can get the total scores and take an average for a kind of final number. And the way the process works is following the meeting, I'll draft a notification to the director's office, and it's at this point that the work of the evaluation team will conclude. And depending on the meeting outcome, should the applicant be selected, the next step would be working closely with land acquisitions and leasing branch with Shell to provide materials needed for drafting the lease. So are there any questions at this stage? No.
As we're going through this evaluation, we can ask questions as pertaining to the line item that we're scoring. Because some of the things I'm sure everyone here probably knows a whole lot more about than I am, more than I do, seeing as I don't work with the county and I don't do this day in and day out. So I assume I could ask questions as we go along.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be a full discussion. Mm-hmm. So okay, yeah, let's dive right in then. So let's start with the proposed reuse, which is the first category on the scorecard. This is for a possible 20 points, and it considers whether the applicant's proposed reuse of the building, A, provides for long-term preservation of the property, B, is compatible with the park's general management plan, C, is it compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, D, is it compatible with the historic value of the property, and E, is it compatible with the preservation of the surrounding environment. So I'm happy to start. I marked a total of 20 points. Residential use, especially for this site, given its surroundings in the townhouse community, is, the lowest impact use that is the park's management plan and rehabilitation and maintenance of the historic house. I considered removing a point for the proposal for not including kind of overseeing the preservation of the outbuildings on the site, the smokehouse, and the brick kitchen. However, ultimately, I thought otherwise, given it wasn't a requirement for the application for the curatorship at the site, and use of those structures obviously wouldn't be, it would be more programmatic and for educational purposes than actual use of what the structures are, and that would potentially not be a residential use application anymore. So that's how I arrived at my scoring. I'd like to open the floor for discussion. We could go around the room and just let me know. We can always return to final scores later if we need to. Does anyone want to go next?
I'll start. I provided a score for proposed reuse of 19 points. The only one that I did not give an excellent score for was the compatibility of the preservation of the surrounding environment. That's a little bit hard to score because there really isn't any preservation around Ash Grove House. So it's just the house itself. So it will hopefully be a very good example of historic preservation in that community, but we have to wait and see how that's all going to come together. So it is a unique setting. So therefore, I looked at it a bit differently, but a good score of 19 points, nevertheless.
That's good. I marked that down.
And Stephanie, I can go next. I also, like you, gave them a total score of 20 points. I thought it was well put together, well thought out. I think that anything anything there's any question with could be discussed with the curator. So I thought it was well done. And I think that considering the limitations of the property just because of where it's located, I thought it was really an excellent job.
I also gave 20 points for those first questions. I agree with all of you.
I can go next. Miss Debbie. I gave a score of 19 out of 20. My comments were I felt it was compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods, provided that the use is limited to residential and excludes the retail store and large school group tours. And the only concern I have that, where I dropped 1 point, my recommendation that I have in the comment section is that any absences from the house longer than 2 weeks have an overnight caretaker arranged by the applicant, particularly if the absence is for the duration of the summer.
And I will make a quick note there that the lease does make certain requirements that the curator would notify staff a certain amount of time in advance. And we have had situations in the past where, curators have gone out of town, and we do make arrangements for our staff to inspect and monitor the property. So that's something we can work with.
I can go next. I also did a 19 out of 20. Most of my concerns are the surrounding neighborhood and the compatibility there. I'm pretty sure I read an email that that there was going to be one open house per year, but it didn't preclude. I was a little unclear of whether it precluded a lot of other visits within the neighborhood. So I have concerns about that. I guess I have concerns about the composting, which was brought up at the original meeting we had. And I think it was Dave, you said something about it having to be contained and not out in the open because of the wildlife issues here. So I just want to make sure that, that's taken into account, and that the community is covered, and we're not going to have any parking issues, or is some sort of limitation as to how many cars can be on the property at a time. So those are kind of open issues for us.
Okay. And I know they also kind of blur into our other categories here too, so we can discuss in detail as we go, but I am making notes on these items. Righty. So moving on to the scope and nature of public benefit, public access. Specifically, this covers the quality of the projects, programs, and services that offer a benefit to the park and its users. So I penciled in a 14 out of 15. I'll say why. The proposal meets the requirement for residential use, which is typically we ask for an annual open house event. And not only that, the proposal does exceed what is required, proposing private tour opportunities, also a good, social media online presence to reach a wider kind of public audience. Now, as we've mentioned, there have been concerns expressed about what an increase of traffic would look like to the house. How often would these private groups meet? How would they get there? Finally, parking, how would parking occur? So yes, I did want to kind of point the group to the email correspondence I had with the applicant as a follow-up to our meeting. And during that correspondence, we did note, especially for parking, it is an archaeologically sensitive area. Unlike some of the other properties we have, there's no on-street parking. There's no kind of ease of access, and parking is a bit of a challenge. Any increase to that, archaeology on the site would be really potentially cost prohibitive. So we discussed in our correspondence that should these questions, concerns, pose issues, the curated program can limit essentially the public benefit component to one annual open house. And, you know, all the requirements for public benefit, public access would be satisfied. So that is an option, you know, that we have to address these issues. So while she is offering above and beyond what is required, we can set the perimeters. And the applicant has indicated, you know, that wouldn't deter her from continuing this process. So because there's some discussion needed on this part of the process, I arrived at 14 out of 15. Would anyone like to go next?
I will, since my response is somewhat similar to yours, although I gave the 15 points out of 15. Just because your email correspondence did indicate that there was an agreement to limitations. And so my comment is that limiting public access to the proposed online information, which I find wonderful, plus the annual open house, I feel like this seems like an ideal way for the house to be open to the public since it's in a neighborhood location.
I can go next. I pretty much agree with you, Stephanie. I did a 14 out of 15 just because of the open issue with the public access. And I know there's archaeological concerns, which I believe affect the actual parking on the property, and which is kind of a component of parking on the street, which is also a problem. So there has to be some sort of win-win there. And I don't think it's going to be a win all around, but you know, those things have to be taken into account.
I'll go next, and I gave the applicant a 15 here and have the same comments as Stephanie did. Obviously, we understand that the applicant is willing to work with us on this and has agreed to limit the public access. And there's always going to be the parking issues at Ash Grove. We probably can't get around that. So we'll see how it all works out.
And I also gave them 15 out of 15 for this. And, you know, my thought is that whether it's an annual thing or another type of an open, you know, open house or visit, on other properties, both resident curator and elsewhere where there's been limited access, we have been able to arrange for like the fast tran buses to take visitors to places. So, you know, there are ways to, you know, to make it so that it's less of an issue for the community, you know, whether it be an annual thing or some kind of a special event.
That's right. And I will note, Liz, real fast, we have done, when we have had open houses in the past for Ash Grove, during the advertising process, we have used the fast tran before as an option.
And then I also scored a 14. I think all the proposals are excellent, just only because of the concern of the public, or a lot of public going on the property, is the only reason I scored it a point less. So I also did 14.
Okay. Okay. Next, if we're ready to move on, is the rehabilitation plan. So this section offers a total of 20 possible points and includes the following items. So feasibility of the goals and schedule of the plan, compatibility of the plan with the treatment plan for the property. Is the proposed lease term consistent with the proposed reuse and rehabilitation plan? Was there consideration to environmentally sustainable building technologies and practices? And was there consideration for any accessibility issues? So here are my notes. I've scored this category in 18. The lease term, reuse, and rehabilitation plan. I'll refer the group to the email correspondence with the applicant. Again, her initial application using the formula we use, which is roughly the fair market rental value into the total proposed investment cost. Her investments in the first year, I think it was 7.9 is what the formula added, came out to. However, her investments in the first year actually exceed what is required by the treatment plan. There were only, for instance, just a few line items for the kitchen or bathroom, upgrade appliances. And in reality, it's going to be much more work than that. So her initial 7.9 years really is 10.6, which is great. A longer lease is great. And my conversation with the applicant also included the fact that, the lease makes it possible to have additional non-discretionary improvements, projects that aren't included in the existing treatment plan currently, so not agreed to at the start of the lease, but or not known about at the start of the lease until the lease is underway. And if both parties agree it's a necessary project, it can be added to the total of the curator's investment, and the lease would be lengthened accordingly, based on the updates to the formula. So that was important to note as well, that it would be sort of, a longer lease, almost 4 years longer than the initial application. My other notes include accessibility is addressed via the proposed online presence. Of course, that online presence would have to be we'd work with the park authority for approval. The goals and schedule proposed is reasonable. It's compatible with the treatment plan. And so 18 out of 20 is what I put. Would anyone want to go next?
I'll go ahead.
Okay, David.
I gave this category a 17, mostly very high marks, except for with the area with the compatibility with the rehabilitation plan, the treatment plan, because there's some ambiguity we're looking at there. We're still figuring out how all that works. The lease is good. There's not a lot in her application about environmentally sustainable building technology and practices, so we'll see. Perhaps we can lean her towards a bit more of that. And accessibility issues, that is addressed in the application, but there's not really a clear plan that's highlighted there. So 17 points out of 20.
I'd be happy to go next. I gave the applicant 20 out of 20. I felt that the applicant has shown through prior experience that she has the knowledge and skills to ensure that the rehabilitation is historically compatible. I like what she did at the example property that she showed. I went ahead and gave all points for environmental sustainability because it's a historic house that we're saving.
I can go next. I gave it an 18 out of 20. I took off a point for the accessibility, a lot of that online stuff, and I didn't know whether that accessibility also crossed over to actually accessing the property. And I also didn't see a lot of the sustainable building. I didn't see that in the application, so it wasn't very clear to me. So I did take a point off there.
And I gave the applicant a 19 out of 20. I think that it was well thought out and well put together. And I think that, everybody else has brought up, their own concerns out of it.
I, like David, scored 17 out of 20, actually for the same reasons David listed.
Alrighty. All down. Moving to experience and qualifications. So this speaks to the applicant's ability to undertake, manage, implement, carry out the rehabilitation and reuse of the property, any specialized skills in preservation projects and examples of previous work, For that, I marked a 13 out of 15, and noted, her ability to implement this type of project is well demonstrated in her work overseeing the restoration of the historic lighthouse. Even without, specific specialized preservation skills that some of our other curators might have, her ability to manage these types of projects, contractors, materials, timelines, and doing so in accordance with our prescribed standards makes, the applicant very qualified to undertake a project like this. So 13 out of 15.
I'll go next. In this category, I gave her 15. And reviewing the presentation again this morning, I really feel strongly that this applicant provides unique qualifications and experience that will greatly benefit the resident curator program. She has demonstrated her projects to be successful in historic preservation. Stephanie's point about skills is relevant, but I feel like she's going to be able to overcome that with her experience with the past projects, and certainly her examples of previous work are well represented in her presentation.
And I also gave her a 15 for all the reasons that David just said.
I did the same, so I'm just going to tag on to to both Elizabeth and David.
I also scored 15.
I scored 15. I feel because of her rehabilitation experience, I like her preservation mindset, that she really cares about the historic properties. And because of her communication skills, I think that that would be a great benefit to the public as part of conveying in the online presence, the history and what she's doing with the house or whatever she decides to put on. I feel that was a great benefit too.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. All righty. Overall presentation and organization of the proposal, I gave a 10 out of 10. This application was thorough and organized. The applicant's presentation was engaging. Not to mention the applicant is also very responsive. If we have any questions, if there's any additional details or information, she's very forthcoming with that in a timely manner. And it's been sort of, consistent delivery throughout the whole process. And she's no doubt committed and dedicated to this project and doing it well.
I gave her a 10 on this section as well. I feel like this presentation was well done, well thought out. We appreciate the time and the effort she put into it.
And I also gave it a 10 out of 10. It's very thorough and very well thought out and just a great job.
I also gave it a 10 because I thought she did an excellent job with the presentation and everything was well thought out.
I also gave it 10. Sorry, Debbie.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine a better steward for this property.
I also gave a 10 and I agree with everyone's comments.
Excellent. So we're down to the last category. As I mentioned earlier, we received that one written comment, which was quite favorable. The public response during the public meeting seemed favorable as well. Of course, as we mentioned, there were questions about parking and increased traffic and that sort of thing. But those are certainly all things that can be addressed with program requirements and through the lease and setting parameters. And so I marked 15, agree.
Okay, so for public response, I read the one email that we received. I have heard nothing but positive comments from the community. The History Commission is supportive. I believe the Architectural Review Board has heard about it and is positive. There really is no negative scenario I can think of for this. We're very fortunate that this is getting through the process as smoothly as possible. We've had some in the past that have not. So I strongly agree that this public response is in good position for us, and I feel like it's going to be very successful. And it's particularly pleasing for me because I was curious about how the Ash Grove or the Westwood Village community would embrace it, and it feels like they probably will be happy that someone's going to be there. So I think that's great. I would just mention that we have, several resident curator sites, and just to kind of put this one in position with the rest of them, we have people who are very experienced. We have some that are not experienced. We have someone who's very, very experienced because they work in historic preservation. I think, this application falls very high towards the top of our curator situations. And obviously, it's nice to have another woman in one of our properties. I think that's great. The model for historic preservation is, the manly man, hammering nails and working on things. But it's nice that that we have another woman resident curator. We have one in Lorton at the Clark and Yeti House. So this is great. So I think we as a evaluation team should have no problems with this application. Obviously, we only have one, but we only have one task to look at here, and it'd be nice if we had another application, but in this case, we're just happy to have a very qualified one. So I have to leave a bit early today, but I'm going to wrap up my comments here and just indicate that I'm strongly supportive of the application, and have enjoyed working with each and every one of you, and appreciate your time on the evaluation team.
Excellent. Thank you, David.
I can go
I
next.
also,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I also marked that I strongly agree, the 20 for the public response.
Yeah, I did the same. I think our community will be welcoming and happy to have somebody on the property maintaining it and taking care of it. We walk by these no trespassing signs all the time, and it's been used as storage, and it really needs some attention to detail and somebody taking care of it. So we do appreciate it.
And I also strongly support the application. I've been with the Park Authority now almost 22 years and am very interested in the historic property. And I think it will be great to have somebody who is in the property, but also somebody who is a strong supporter of historic preservation. So I give it full score.
I also scored 20 for public response based on what I heard. And I also strongly agree that this is a great application.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so we all have our scores in. I'm going to do a little math because I'm not trusting my Excel formula right now. Something's going on. Safe to say it's in the 90s.
Stephanie, I raised 2 of my scores, so it will change a bit, but I'll forward it to you. So
as well, actually. Okay. Yeah, 96 right now is where we stand, and that's just going to go up with the higher scores. So it's at this portion of our evaluation that we make a determination. I mean, I think it's very straightforward that we've selected Sheila for curatorship of the Ash Grove house. I agree with everyone. It's super exciting to have an application and have found someone who's qualified and trustworthy and experienced and dedicated, and yeah, looking forward to the next steps of this process. But I want to thank you all for your time and commitment to the meetings and the whole public process with the curator program. It's such an important component. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments before we wrap up? And I see Sheila's on here too, so I want to thank you for being with us through this process and for providing a fantastic application.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and just, if I may, I'm really excited to be able to move over to the neighborhood and get started on the house and bring a little life back in. Sometimes that's all it takes, right, to perk it up a little bit. But I also appreciate all the support from the committee and your expertise. That's one thing I didn't have a lot of at the Lighthouse. I was kind of a lone ranger out there, so it's nice to have support and people to run ideas by and get feedback and determinations on different things. And I know that will be really helpful moving forward. And again, as far as all of the activities that I suggested, please know that they're all suggestions. They're all just ideas. I don't have to do any of them. I mean, I'm doing it as a way to promote the property. And if one open house is all you want to do to promote the property, then I'm happy with that because I get to live there. So, and as things move on, I know this with the Lighthouse, as it gets better renovated, more pleasant, I guess, for people to come and look and whatever, we can always change and adjust as we move along. But, the first year or two are certainly going to be focused on the actual renovation and livability. And, that's going to be my first concern.
Thank you, Sheila. All right.
All right. Well, hearing and seeing no further comments, I too would like to thank everyone for your time and participation on this panel and this meetings. Before we close out the work session, if I could, I'd like to remind all the members of the panel and anybody who might be watching this recording that we have recorded all of our meetings, our work sessions, and the public meeting, and those recordings are available online at engage.fairfaxcounty.gov/Ash Grove. And that website also includes a copy of the proposed application for curatorship, the established treatment plan for the property, and a virtual tour of the house. So all those resources will remain there as we move forward this recommendation to the board and move through the additional leasing process. Thank you all again for your time and consideration of this application, and wish everyone a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.